Discovered the thief who ruined my wedding day was linked to my half-sister's husband, but she refuses to acknowledge the truth. I never imagined I'd find myself writing about this, but I just don't know how to handle the slow, painful distancing of my older half-sister. I'm 30, and she's 36. Since I was 12, I've had this incredibly close bond with her. She really stepped up for me, especially after I went no contact with my mother. We don't share the same mom. My mother was complicit in the physical abuse I endured from my stepdad, and while that side of my family fractured, my half-sister became the cornerstone I desperately needed. For years, she's guided me through every major hardship and milestone, relationship woes, career choices, all those difficult times that needed a wise and loving ear. I always thought we'd be inseparable. We also share another half-sister. All of us have the same dad, but each of us has a different mom. The three of us used to chat every day in a group message, sharing everything, memes, complaints, support, mundane life updates. But everything changed after I got married in May. The last time we spoke was the very first day of my honeymoon. It's a silence that aches. I miss her so much, and I don't even understand how we unraveled this completely. To be clear, my husband, 32, was never a point of contention. She never spoke badly of him, quite the opposite. She always told me how in love we were, what a great couple we made, and how happy she was for us. There was no hidden resentment or warnings I'd missed. My wedding, at least regarding my marriage, should have been a point of pride for us all. But something else happened during my wedding that triggered a chain reaction. It was a backyard ceremony, beautiful, understated, and supposedly safe amongst family and friends. We got ready on the property, where my dad and grandfather live in separate houses, but none of my siblings have homes there. After the celebration, I learned that all our gifts, including an envelope with a large sum of cash, had gone missing. They were never secured, and by the time anyone noticed, they'd been stolen. I felt so violated. On the third day after the wedding, the realization hit me hard, and I immediately turned to my family in our group chat, asking urgently if anyone knew what happened or who might have grabbed them for safekeeping. Their tepid, half-hearted responses only frustrated me more. Desperate, I reached out to my older half-sister directly, expressing how upset I was and how much it hurt that no one seemed more concerned or urgent about helping us. I was expecting sympathy or maybe help brainstorming what to do next. Instead, she blindsided me. She shot back immediately, blaming my husband and our friends, insisting that the wedding party had stolen an extreme amount of items. She told me we should start the search with them, not the family. I was floored. Nobody had even hinted at this before. No one had suggested my friends were responsible, certainly not to my face. For context, we'd both graduated from colleges out of state, so the majority of our wedding party were college friends, people she'd only met that weekend for the very first time. I tried to reason with her. There had been an army of vendors and caterers going in and out without any supervision. The setup was wide open, and my husband and I had both pointed out that someone should probably keep an eye on things. None of the gifts taken were easy to miss. One was larger than a suitcase. Travel logistics alone would make it almost impossible for any of my friends flying out the next day to take them, never mind the exorbitant baggage fees. But she wouldn't hear any of it. She insisted that her child, my nephew and the ring bearer, had seen people from my wedding party take things, even though she hadn't mentioned this at all until now. She accused my friends of being liars and thieves. When I pushed her to clarify, she shifted the story again. Suddenly, multiple children witnessed it. Then, a few messages later, she herself had apparently seen everything. Her anger just kept escalating. She hurled hurtful accusations at my bridesmaids, one in particular, calling her a cheater and far worse, saying, "Ask that skank liar, thief, and whore, and I bet she knows exactly where it all went." I was absolutely stunned. I had never heard her speak this way to me, not in the almost 2 decades we'd been close. I tried to keep my cool, but disbelief kept bubbling over. I asked where this was all coming from. She met these people for a few hours total. "You have no real friends," she told me. She said they were evil to the core. According to her, 15 people she barely knew were all plotting to rob me blind and then haul the contraband across the country at their own expense. None of this made sense. The accusations grew even stranger. She claimed I was blaming family for theft. I kept repeating that I didn't think anyone in the family was responsible. I truly felt it was likely a vendor or someone else taking advantage of the chaos, but she kept circling back, fixating on one of my bridesmaids. By this point, I was in tears, shaking, completely lost as to what was happening or why. This all happened as my husband and I were trying to leave for our honeymoon, and finally, he noticed how distressed I was. He asked what was happening, and that's when my sister called me. She kept insisting we were trying to pin the blame on our brother, Alan, her full sibling, my half-sibling. Alan battled drug addiction over a decade ago. He's been clean for years, married, raising kids, constantly putting his family first. I never accused him. Not once. And I genuinely believe he's left that dark chapter in the past. But as the conversation spiraled, I could feel myself breaking down. I was shouting at her over the phone, swearing that I never accused Alan of anything. I think I started to have a panic attack. It was all happening so fast and so irrationally that I felt like I was losing my grip. My husband stepped in then, taking my phone and putting her on speaker. She yelled at us both, saying, "Stop blaming Alan." We were floored. Neither of us had said such a thing, and when my husband pressed her for proof or concrete details, she doubled down. Your friends are thieves. You're both bad judges of character. My husband defended his friends. These were people he trusted, who'd supported us throughout our relationship. He calmly tried to get her to tell us what exactly she'd seen or heard, but she never gave a clear account. She just grew angrier, told us to F this, and then called her own husband to join the conversation. He picked up the phone, annoyed, demanding, "Why are you blaming Alan for stealing?" My husband couldn't believe what he was hearing. He repeated again and again that we never blamed Alan, that we didn't know where this idea came from. Her husband seemed confused, saying, "That's not what she told me." My husband tried to explain that we'd never pointed a finger at anyone in the family. The call more or less fizzled out. I left for my honeymoon in shock, expecting she'd reach out after we returned, maybe to explain her anger or even apologize. But weeks have passed. The silence remains, heavier than ever, and I'm left grieving the bond I thought was unbreakable, still trying to piece together how everything fell apart. I never expected things to unravel this way. After the misunderstanding at my wedding, everything changed between my older sister and me. She unfollowed me on every social media platform, took down any photos of us together, removed her tags from my pictures, like our connection had been systematically erased. Then our sister group chat, which used to be just the three of us, vanished without a trace. I'd had it pinned for years, and suddenly it was gone. I'm not sure if she blocked me or what happened, but the absence was jarring. I never delete messages, so I know this wasn't by my hand. She even stopped sharing her location with me, which, though small, felt like another door closing. Worst of all, she started telling people I blamed our brother for the theft at my wedding. My grandmother even called demanding to know why I thought he took something that night. I've been consistent in saying the same thing every single time. I don't think it was him. If anything, I believe it was someone working with one of our vendors. Considering how many new faces were there that night, all with easy access, it made more sense than blaming my own family. I dug through every cell phone photo and video from that night, cross-referenced different angles, and spoke to our photographer and videographer, people my husband and I have worked with for years and trust, implicitly. If anyone would have noticed something shady, it would have been them, but nothing they told me confirmed the accusations my sister threw around. Things got stranger when I started to wonder about my dad's outdoor cameras. He's always been meticulous about security, and I kept asking for the footage from that night and the next morning, at least 5 times now, but he keeps putting me off. Each time, it's some variation of "I'll get it to you," but nothing ever materializes. I'm starting to think the footage is probably gone. I don't know what's being hidden or if anything is at all, but the uncertainty gnaws at me. What actually happened that night? A deeper doubt crept in. What if my brother did steal it? I hate even thinking that, but the strange responses from my family, so out of character for all of them, set my mind spinning in circles. Despite everything, I haven't spoken to my sister since. Her 2 boys, my nephews whom I adore, have had birthdays, and for the first time ever, my messages went unanswered. Not even a simple "thank you." I'm starting to fear that she's going no contact with me, and I can't even figure out why. It's a terrible feeling, not even knowing the reason your sister cut you off. I keep replaying everything over in my mind, but all I did was try to celebrate my wedding day surrounded by the people I love. I can't apologize for things I didn't do. I never said the things she accuses me of. Even if she does think my friends are that awful, my husband and I live so far away, it's not like she has to interact with them again. Maybe that's what hurts, the total shutdown over something that seems fixable, or at least forgivable. Even if I thought my younger sister's friends were terrible, I can't imagine cutting her out of my life and pushing her further into those friendships. I love my sister, I miss her, and I especially miss my nephews. It scares me that it's already been over 6 months, and I am starting to truly fear we may never speak again. I wasn't going to write anything else. I'd started telling myself that silence was going to be the end of this story, but last week, something cracked open in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't a grand confession or a tearful reconciliation. It was a listing on Facebook Marketplace for a handmade walnut serving board with our married last name burned into the wood and our wedding date carved in the corner. It was one of the gifts I cried about losing. There it was, 20 minutes from my dad's house, described as brand new, never used, for $20. I clicked on the seller's profile so fast my hands were shaking. 2 public photos, both in the same backyard I recognized from growing up in that town, the same scrubby trees, the same sun-bleached fence. My husband said the rational thing. Maybe it's a duplicate, maybe someone gifted you the same thing, but there isn't a duplicate of my name and our date. I messaged her from a burner account I used to creep on decor ideas, acting breathless and casual. Can pick up today. Cash. She sent me the address and I had to put the phone down because I felt that old, unpleasant adrenaline pooling in my stomach. We didn't go alone. My husband drove. I sat on my hands all the way there, because if I looked at them I saw that board in my head and then my sister's face and the way she wouldn't hear me. The house was a yellow rental I've passed 100 times without noticing. The girl who walked out with the board had a messy bun and that tired, guarded look people wear when they expect the price to be negotiated down. She was wearing a faded t-shirt, and in the loop logo across the chest was the name of the rental company that supplied our tent, the dance floor, the cocktail tables. It didn't register at first because it was so stupidly on the nose I thought I was making it up. I made myself smile. I asked if she'd take $15. She nodded immediately. I handed her the $20 anyway so I wouldn't have to count, and while she was digging out change, my husband took a photo of the license plate on the truck in the driveway. I told her the board looked really familiar. She froze. I can still see the way her pupils jumped to my face. I didn't accuse her. I didn't raise my voice. I said my name, my husband's name, the date on the board. Not a performance, just facts. She didn't pretend she didn't know. She just said, "Oh," like someone had dropped a dish in the next room, and then, I didn't know it was that. She started talking before I could ask anything. I wish I had recorded it, but I didn't want to spook her. She said her boyfriend had brought home a couple boxes of leftover wedding stuff from a job. He told her the couple never picked them up. She said he works for the tent company sometimes, unloading trucks. He wasn't home. She said she was sorry in a small voice, like that would be the end of it. I told her I was going to call the company. She nodded so fast it was almost a flinch and asked me not to give her name. I left with the board in my lap and a buzzing in my ears. The tent company's manager called me back within an hour. I gave him the least dramatic version of what happened. He listened. He didn't do the thing where people defend their people reflexively. He just said, "I'm sorry," and I could tell he meant it. He asked for the address. He asked me to text him a photo of the board. When the text went through, my phone pinged again almost immediately. He sent me a screenshot of an internal message from June, around the time of our wedding, about an employee named Drew who had been let go for attendance with a note added later, "Customer complaint, missing items, cards?" The note had a question mark like the person didn't want to type the word stolen. It gets stranger in the way bureaucracy always makes true stories stranger. He looped in their insurance. He looped in the police liaison they use when events get messy. Suddenly I was back in a world of case numbers and, "Can you describe the package?" And the sour taste of repeating the worst parts out loud. But this time, someone wrote things down who wasn't me. This time, the manager sent a text that said, "I can go over there with an officer if you're comfortable." I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. They didn't find a trove of my life in the house. I don't want this to sound more cinematic than it was. There was no hidden room, no chest spilling envelopes like a movie. What they did find in the garage were two flattened gift bags I recognized, one with my college roommate's handwriting and a card stuck to the side with washi tape, and a crumpled wrapping paper with a pattern I picked out myself for the registry table. The girl texted me from an unlisted number I didn't give her, begging me not to press charges, saying she didn't know, that he said he found them in the trash after the wedding. I sat in my car reading that and felt that hot, dizzy relief and anger that live next to each other in your chest. The officer called me from the driveway, told me they were taking statements, that the boyfriend wasn't home, that they'd be following up with the company and with us. The manager texted me again, there might be more at the warehouse. We clean out trucks there at the end of the night. And there were. 3 days later, I stood in a cold, cavernous building that smelled like rubber and spilled beer and watched a man roll a cart toward me with a stack of things that didn't belong there. My maid of honor's hand-painted card box with our initials, the custom print of the place we got engaged, still in the shipping tube. A quilt my grandmother and her church ladies made by hand, folded into itself like it was trying to be smaller. I cried in front of strangers, ugly and unashamed, because I didn't know I would ever see it again. Most of the cards were gone. There were slips of envelopes torn in ways that made my stomach turn. Some had the check still tucked in. You can't cash a check made out to a married name when you're not that person. Some were empty. I called every person I could identify from handwriting and told them what happened, and it was humiliating and also healing, because they said they were just happy to hear my voice. People were kinder than I expected. No one asked if my friends were thieves. I sent my older sister a text with a photo of the board, the quilt, the card box, and one sentence: it was a temporary worker from the tent company. I didn't add a lesson or a told you so. I didn't mention her calling my friend a whore, or the way her story kept expanding to include whoever she needed it to include. I sent the same to my grandmother and my dad and our younger sister. My grandmother called me crying and then gave the phone to my grandfather, who said, "Good," like he was spitting something out. My dad texted, "Come by," and when I did, he admitted what I thought he wouldn't. There wasn't any camera footage from that weekend. A storm the week before knocked out the hard drive and he hadn't figured out how to get the system back up. He'd been stalling me because he was embarrassed and because he didn't want to be in the middle. I should be angrier than I was, but all I felt was tired. Our younger sister came over with coffee and sat on the step and told me something I can't stop turning over. The night of the wedding, before we left, she saw our older sister's husband back by the tent where the decor was piled for cleanup, rifling through a bin of my extras, ribbons, a table runner, leftover favors. She told him to knock it off. He laughed and said he was just looking. She didn't tell me then because it seemed so small, so nothing, and by morning there were bigger storms. She said she's been shut out too since I attacked our older sister, which I did not do, but language changes depending on where you're standing. She said our older sister cried on the phone and said I'd tried to turn everyone against Alan and that I was protecting those people over family. Hearing it out loud, knowing what I know now, was like feeling a splinter work its way to the surface, painful, but also relief. I wish I could say the truth fixed everything. I sent my older sister a second message after the first one went unread for a day. I'd like to bring the boys their gifts in person. The 3 little dots popped up, and disappear, and popped up again. Hours later, I got one response. Please stop. No explanation. No acknowledgement. No, I'm glad you found your things. Just a border where there used to be a door. Her husband texted my husband from an unknown number, telling him to keep our names out of his mouth and that where there's smoke there's fire. The same tired cliches people use when they can't name anything real. I drove the quilt to my grandmother myself. We sat at her kitchen table, us and the hum of the refrigerator, and smoothed our hands over the seams. She has arthritis and still picked at one corner until the thread lay flat. I thought it was gone, she said, and I told her that I had, too. It felt like holding back a tide. Later that night, one more message from the tent company manager. The police had talked to the boyfriend. He admitted to taking the card box, not the rest. He said he panicked and dumped most of the presents in a back room at the warehouse. He said he used the cash for rent. I believed most of it and not all of it. He gave names of 2 bartenders he claimed saw him do it. The company fired him months ago. They're covering the deductible on their insurance claim. We'll never see the envelope my husband's aunt gave us with the crisp bills folded like a book. But I have the board and the quilt and the card box, and those feel like anchors. I don't know what my sister will do with this. Maybe nothing. Maybe she's so anchored in the story she chose that there isn't room for any other version, even the one with evidence. It's almost easier to believe 15 strangers are evil than to consider your own orbit might be off. I have to sit with the fact that I can't make her hear me. I can't make her be the person she was for me when I was 12 and scared and needed someone to be the adult in the room. I can only be the adult now, in a new room, with proof and a police report and a wooden board drying on my kitchen counter, permanent scorch marks where my name lives next to his, a date you can't sand out no matter how hard you try. I did one reckless thing, and I won't apologize for it. I went to my nephew's basketball game, the older one. I sat high up on the bleachers and didn't make a scene. He saw me and waved like kids do, big, whole arm wave that breaks your heart, before he remembered whatever he's been told and tucked his hand back in his hoodie pocket. At the end, our younger sister walked down with me to the parking lot. My older sister put her boys in her car with their father and then stopped 10 feet from me. For a second, I thought she would say something. She didn't. She looked at me, then at the quilt folded on the back seat of my car, and then she left. I don't know if this is the end. It feels like the first honest chapter since May. I don't know what to do with all the missing cash, missing months, missing conversations, and I don't know how to grieve someone who's still alive and walking around in the same town as all of us. I know the difference between a thing you can fix with a screwdriver and a thing you can only carry because it's too heavy to put down. Right now, I'm carrying. I thought the quilt would be the last thing that made it home. I told myself that was the end of the scavenger hunt, that the universe had given me exactly one improbable mercy and that was my allotment. Then, last Tuesday, a detective with a voice like a dial tone called and asked if I could come by to look at possible property related to a string of event thefts. I said yes before I realized I was still in slippers. The station smelled like burnt coffee and a floor cleaner I used to associate with middle school hallways. They put me in a room with a table too big for it and rolled in 2 plastic tubs. It wasn't cinematic. There was a melted votive stuck to the side of one bin like gum under a chair. There were 3 frames that didn't belong to me, someone else's cake topper, a handful of place cards from a couple I don't know. And then, toward the bottom, under a loose tangle of ribbon, the big thing I thought I would never see again because it would have been the first thing anyone with eyes and working arms grabbed, our mixer. It was the robin's egg one, the exact color I picked out with ridiculous care one rainy afternoon months before the wedding, the color my husband teased me about because it's a machine. Babe, it doesn't need to be charming. The detective didn't understand why I sat down on the floor and laughed a little and then cried. He handed me a box of tissue and did that careful police officer thing where he looks at a corner of the room and tries to be invisible in case he's in the presence of something holy. They asked me to sign forms. They explained chain of custody. I nodded like I knew anything. In the hallway, I texted the tent company manager a photo of the mixer on the gray table and he wrote back, just, good. Then, a beat later, hearing is Thursday. I didn't think I would go. These things happen without you all the time. People get arraigned and plead out and make deals and you read about it in someone else's handwriting and you say, I guess that's that. But I put the date in my phone anyway, and Thursday morning I found myself in a pew on the hard side of justice with my hands folded like prayer was going to be something other than muscle memory. This part is not neat. I want it to be neat. I want to be able to say that I went because I am brave or efficient, not because I wanted to put my eyes on the person who made a storm out of a celebration. They brought Drew in through a side door in a flannel he shouldn't have been allowed to keep because it made him look like a kid at a bus stop. He didn't scan the room for me because he doesn't know me. He looked at his shoes, then at the prosecutor, then at the floor again like he was waiting for someone to tell him where to stand. I saw my sister before I let myself believe it. Not a trick of dress or haircut. Her husband next to her, a row up from me, in the section where you sit when you're there for the defendant and not for the state. She had her hair back in the way she does when she's trying to keep her face from giving anything away. She didn't look at me. She looked at the mother in front of them with the same jawline as Drew and a church bulletin clenched so tight it had turned into a softball. I didn't make a scene. I sat there and listened to a man with a calm voice explain restitution and first offense and cooperation. I signed a piece of paper that said I could be contacted for victim impact, and my pen made a scratchy sound too loud in the quiet. When I stood up to leave, my sister's husband was in the aisle at the same time. He stopped like you do when you're choosing whether to hold a door open for someone or let it swing. Don't, he said, low, almost friendly, like we were at a barbecue and he was telling me not to burn the burgers. Just don't do this. I said, do what? And felt my hands start to tingle because my body knows when it's about to be asked to hold more than it can. You got what you needed, he said, and flicked his eyes toward the front where Drew's lawyer was collecting papers. Let it go. There was a shine to his voice that made my skin go cold. It was the shine people get when they think they're being reasonable while they move the edges of a thing. I said, quietly, did you know him before this? And he smiled with his mouth and not his eyes. Everyone knows everyone, he said, like it was a joke about our town and not an answer. Our younger sister had her phone ready before I got back to my car. She had screenshotted a photo from years ago, 4th of July, fireworks blurred like jellyfish behind a group of people in fold-out chairs. A tag on the bottom, Drew's mom. There was my brother-in-law in the middle of them, beer can in his lap, 2 kids behind him in matching sweatshirts, the same red grin logo they wore last fall. The caption said, family. It felt like what I'd been circling, and also like stepping into a room with the lights off and finding the furniture with your shins. Of course. Of course she couldn't hear me. Of course she invented a world where 15 strangers were villains because the other version of the story put the wrong faces in the wrong roles. I didn't text her with the picture. I drove to my dad's instead. He was in the garage with the door up, pretending to find something on a shelf until I put the mixer on the workbench next to his wrenches like a trophy that didn't belong in that lineup. He touched it with the back of his knuckles the way we used to test if a pan was too hot, and said, ha, and then, softer, good. My grandmother made me bring the mixer to her kitchen, even though it's a dumb thing to lug around, because she wanted to see it sitting where a thing goes when it's home. We plugged it in and the motor whirred, not pretty, but steady. She said, sturdy, and then, from the front room, there was the sound of mail hitting a floor. My grandfather forgets the slot startles us both even when we're expecting it. There was an envelope, no return address, postmarked from our town. Inside, a money order for $500 and one of those apologies that doesn't use the word. For what was taken. Didn't know the whole situation. The handwriting was neighborly and generic, the kind of cursive you learn from watching someone else write while you're supposed to be listening to something else. My grandmother held the note at arm's length and said, cowards, and then tore the paper into 3 even strips like she was making ribbon. I took the money order to the bank and they held it like it might be counterfeit. It cleared. It was small and also not small at all. Half of what my husband's aunt gave us in cash and more than any stranger owes me if we're talking math and not equilibrium. 2 nights later the younger one, my littlest nephew, left a drawing in my grandmother's mailbox. He did it with a blue marker that had seen better days, so you have to tilt your head to see it right. It's a rectangle with little lines across it and 2 stick figures with their arms out on either side. He wrote kilt in the corner. He is 7 and cannot spell quilt and I almost wished he never learns. There was no note. Just the drawing, and a crayon thumbprint at the edge like a seal. The next morning, the tent company manager called to ask if I would mind speaking with their insurance in more formal terms. I said yes because I am so tired of pretending that if I don't touch a thing it will be less real. He put me on a 3-way call with a woman who asked good questions and pronounced my last name right on the first try. She said Drew had given a statement that matched what they'd already pieced together from the warehouse and from my marketplace adventure. He added a detail. He said he'd been told by a family friend that most people don't come back for the extra stuff, so no one would miss a box or 2. That's nothing. That's everything. Who tells a teenager who unloads trucks for a tent company that the perimeter doesn't matter? Who learns that and then uses it for exits you can lie about later? I keep trying not to write around the thing that keeps tapping at my shoulder. It is this: I think my sister knew enough to be scared. I think she chose a version of reality where I don't call the tent company and I don't go to the warehouse and I don't sit in a courtroom and see the way the word family rearranges a person's idea of gravity. I think she's married to a man who moves through that word like a passport and expects everyone to accept his stamps. I think she believed that if she told the lie fast and loud, she could keep her orbit intact. Sunday, our younger sister convinced me to come to church because Grandma asked. I haven't sat in that building since I was a teenager when the pews felt like tackling dummies and the sermons like lectures I could outrun. I sat on the aisle and counted the knots in the wood to avoid making eye contact with anyone who knew my middle school haircut. After the closing hymn, while the organist had the last word, I felt, rather than saw, my sister 3 rows back. The air changed the way it does before a storm, not colder exactly, just aware of itself. She waited until the aisle was crowded and then slid in front of me like we were strangers at the grocery store trying not to bump carts. For half a second, we were standing almost shoulder to shoulder and I could see the little bump of scar on her wrist from when she fell off the bike at Dad's when we were kids. She didn't look at me. She said, in that same small careful voice I know from being 12 and terrified and calling her at midnight, "You've made this worse," and then kept moving. I didn't say anything because there are words that wreck a building and words that keep a person outside in the rain, and I didn't trust myself to choose the right ones in a crowded aisle with 100 programs being folded and unfolded in patient hands. I let her go. I stood there long enough that the usher started flipping the lights like I was a teenager again, ignoring closing time, and then I went to my grandmother's house and held the quilt across my lap like a shield. There is a copy of the police report in a manila envelope on my kitchen table. There is a mixer the color of spring lined up under our cabinets like it was never anywhere else. There is a money order stub pinned under a magnet on the fridge next to a child's drawing of a kilt. There are more gifts we will never see again, more cash that turned into someone else's rent, more versions of me in other people's mouths I will never get to correct. I texted my sister one more time. It was boring and plain on purpose. I'm here when you're ready to talk with the truth between us. The 3 dots came and went like a heartbeat, and then nothing. I turned off my phone and took the board with our name on it off the counter and leaned it against the wall where we'll see it every time we leave the house. The scorch marks are still there. The date is still the date. Some things you can refinish. Some things you don't try to sand out because the damage is the story and also the proof that it survived.